Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my 2016 Sami Rohr Prize video. The Sami Rohr Prize was started to award Jewish emerging writers in either fiction or nonfiction, with even-numbered years being nonfiction years. I have a whole playlist of videos, which I'll link down below, and what I do is I pick 3 of the 5 contenders to review. You can find links to my Goodreads reviews for these 3 books also linked down below. The last book I finished was also my least favorite. This is The Rag Race, How Jews Sewed Their Way to Success in America and the British Empire by Adam D. Mendelsohn. Adam Mendelsohn, I'll read from my notes to make sure I get it all correct, is an associate professor of historical studies at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. His research centers on the modern Jewish experience in America and Britain. Mendelsohn poses the question, how did U.S. Jews become so successful in the garment industry? He juxtaposes this community against that of English Jews, who, mid-19th century, were on the same trajectory, but ultimately the latter group didn't make it that big. I didn't really like Mendelsohn's writing style too much. I thought it was dense and his use of colloquial metaphors was a bit jarring. It was also a little bit difficult to follow sometimes, though granted I'm no expert on economic or financial concerns. I may have needed a primer. What I found most fascinating was how the Industrial Revolution worked so differently in 2 Western countries. But upon reflection, of course it did. England was an older, smaller, and more established country. The United States was humongous and still going through expansion. Their populations, therefore, had different needs. And English Jews were largely native to the country, whereas the American Jewish community was constantly bolstered by new immigrants. And the countries were rocked by different historical events. Yes, the British Empire continued to grow, and Mendelsohn particularly chronicled British Jews who went off to Australia, and one family that made it big. But in contrast, several American Jewish firms and individuals were able to capitalize on the California Gold Rush and the Civil War and its aftermath. I'm impressed by the amount of research that Mendelsohn did for this book, which I think counters some of his sweeping statements, because actual history is much more complicated. There are a lot of ups and downs, even within single decades or years. But ultimately, by the time that the waves of Eastern European Jewish immigrants arrived on U.S. soil in the 1880s, they could join an already thriving Jewish-American garment infrastructure. Next, or just before this, I read Rav Kook, A Mystic in the Time of Revolution by Yehuda Mirsky. Yehuda Mirsky is a professor of Near Eastern and Judaic Studies at Brandeis University in Massachusetts, and he's also on the faculty of the Schusterman Center for Israel Studies. Mirsky's writing can also be a little bit dense, but Rav Kook is also more of a hook. Did you like what I did there, Missy? In part because he's an actual character, and in part because of his ideas. I've read biographies of many Jewish historical figures this year, but he strikes me as the most approachable. Rav Avraham Yitzhak Kook was born in the Russian Empire and became the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi in the British Mandate of Palestine. He was a man with many enemies and actually faced a lot of pushback because he was devoted to seemingly opposite ideas. He was a religious Zionist before that was trendy for either the religious or for Zionists. He also stood up for secular Zionists, and even incorporated ideas of universalism into his thinking. But mostly he was spiritually devout, and believed in a divinely inspired Jewish purpose. As Mirsky puts it, Israel's return to Zion would make for the possibility, at long last, of the emergence of an ethic that could sustain the world, precisely because it does not despair of it, but rather it seeks to have the natural world realize its own participation in the divine. Kook died before the Holocaust, and in the wake of it, his son, who edited a lot of his books for public consumption, became more of a nationalist. Mirsky wants to save Kook's more complicated and controversial ideas from obscurity. He states Kook's goal as reconciling his love for the people of Israel with his love of humanity. Kook did hold beliefs that many readers across the spectrum would find problematic. He could be anti-Christian and also had sexist ideas. But Mirsky's portrayal of Kook made him too three-dimensional for me to discard him, like his critics did. And the first book I've read was also my favorite of the bunch. This is Killing a King, The Assassination of Yitzhak Rabin and the Remaking of Israel by Dan Efron. Dan Efron is the executive editor for news at Foreign Policy. But his knowledge for this book comes from his long stint at Newsweek's Jerusalem bureau. Killing a King is somewhat like the Rav cookbook, because it also involves a controversial, humanist-leaning leader in the land of Israel. But things turned out much worse for Yitzhak Rabin. Ephron's book chronicles the last 2 years of Rabin's life, for both the prime minister and for his assassin, Yigal Amir. As a journalist, Ephron's writing is crisp and to the point. I kind of wish he infused Rabin with more of a personal life, but I think that it's fair to say that both he and Amir defined themselves by grandiosity. Rabin won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1994 for signing the Oslo Accords along with another Israeli leader, Shimon Peres, and PLO leader Yasser Arafat. He was going to give up major parts of the West Bank, also known by their ancient names Judea and Samaria, the Palestinians. Amir saw that as a fundamental betrayal of the Jewish people, and he claimed religious textual support in killing him. This book was very difficult to read in light of current realities. The Israeli government under Benjamin Netanyahu is expansionist and very status quo about the occupation. Israelis and Palestinians continue to attack each other. Even as I read this book, an Israeli woman, among others, was shot, and the woman lost her baby. And even more recently, just the other day, Israeli writer Amos Oz died. He was featured in this book as a friend of Shimon Peres and was another advocate for peace. I think Rabin's daughter might have the right of it when Ephron personifies her opinion thusly. She has come to view the last 20 years as the story of a power shift from the likes of her father, secular, pragmatic, and moderate, to the advocates of Alon Shvut and the settlement movement generally. Ethnically chauvinist, uncompromising, often messianic. That the assassination would mark the birth of this new Israel is nothing short of horrifying to her. But beyond my own biased misery and the fact that my favorite books seem to stab me in the gut, there is a lot to recommend this. To whittle it down, if you want a direct and comprehensive view of Israel and the conflict during the 1990s, and a thorough way to how we got to the situation today, then check this book out. And that about covers it for me now. I come away victorious. This was my final backlist Sami Rohr video to make. I'm really glad that I took it upon myself in 2018 to read I'm really glad that in 2015 I took it upon myself to read 15 nonfiction books of Jewish interest. I feel smarter and more able to continue in this genre, even the non-memoir parts of this genre, or Jewish history anyway. That being said, bring on the 2019 Sami Rohr Prize and my valiant return to fiction! Huzzah! Thanks so much for joining me. This was definitely my reading goal where I most challenged myself this year. I hope you did well with the reading goals where you challenged yourselves too. I have one more video to make in 2018. We'll see if I get it up or not. But anyway, I'll see you next time.